Good morning and welcome to Rising. We have a great show for you today. I'm Amber Duke, joined by Niall Stanage.
Good to be with you, Amber. Always a pleasure to see you, even in rather somber circumstances, I think, this week.
Yeah, tough day, but we're going to get to the news coming up on Rising. Senator Rand Paul is now revealing more information on the U.S. attack on the Venezuelan cartel boat.
Plus, Paramount Skydance is reportedly preparing an offer to buy Warner Brothers, which owns CNN.
And there may be tension between President Trump and Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu after the country's latest strike on Hamas leaders in Qatar.
But first, President Trump dropping a bombshell development earlier this morning in the hunt for Charlie Kirk's killer. Take a listen to that.
I always say, I think, just to protect us all, and so Fox doesn't get sued, and we all don't get sued, and everything else. But I think with a high degree of certainty, we have him in custody.
The president went on to indicate that he believed it was a person close to the suspect who ultimately turned him in. Sources tell our sister network, News Nation, that the suspect confessed to his father that he was the shooter. After the FBI released these photos of a person of interest, the Bureau described him as college-aged and wearing a black long-sleeve shirt, blue jeans, a hat and sunglasses at the time of the shooting. It is unclear if this is the same person who is in custody. The FBI also released this video of the alleged shooter. You can see him there running across the rooftop, jumping down from the building. And investigators say they have also discovered a footwear impression, a palm print and forearm prints.
As for the shooter's motive, still unclear, but the Wall Street Journal is reporting that a bolt-action rifle was found in a wooded area nearby, and reports that ammunition associated with the gun was engraved with expressions promoting, quote, transgender and anti-fascist ideology. In the meantime, Kirk's casket was carried by his friend, the Vice President J.D. Vance, aboard Air Force Two to make its final trip to Arizona, where his family lives.
This came just hours after Trump made this announcement ahead of his speech at a Pentagon September 11th memorial ceremony. Take a listen.
Before we begin, let me express the horror and grief so many Americans at the heinous assassination of Charlie Kirk have felt. Charlie was a giant of his generation, a champion of liberty, and an inspiration to millions and millions of people. I'm pleased to announce that I will soon be awarding Charlie Kirk posthumously the Presidential Medal of Freedom.
So, Amber, I mean, obviously, very sad. Any form of political violence is terrible, and this was a terrible shooting. I don't want to put you in an awkward situation, but you obviously did know Charlie Kirk personally, and so I want to honour that as well. How are you doing? What's? I mean, I can guess at your feelings, but where are you in this?
Yeah, I appreciate that. Very sad, mostly really angry. Charlie was doing what he thought was the thing to prevent political violence, which is actually having dialogue and conversations with people who disagreed with him. He said many times, including on one of his most recent college tours, that when people stop talking, that's when the violence starts. And so for him to go out doing that is just tragic. He was a really generous person with his time. You know, I can't say that I was incredibly close with him, but I've met him multiple times over the years, have spoken at Turning Point events, have done his podcast, and he was just kind to everybody that came in contact with him. Hearing from employees about how he would notice things that they were doing that they weren't aware that he even knew about, and would praise them and encourage them. Yeah, it's been a really hard week. And I think it's compounded with the fact that obviously working in news, you have to cover these events and get information to your readers, and doing that at the same time that you're trying to grieve and process the loss of someone that most of us in conservative media either knew or worked with, has been incredibly challenging.
I know you say you would have met him numerous times. You weren't necessarily like ultra close friends, but he did travel with a security team, or he did have a security team on this occasion. Was he conscious of these kinds of threats in general, do you know? Or
I think he was aware that it was a possibility. He talked about having a threat made on his life somewhat recently. And I think it just speaks to his courage and his bravery that, and who's to say, maybe he was afraid of something like this happening, but to have that fear or not have that fear and continue doing this anyway, and having the support of his wife to keep doing it, knowing that there was a potential threat, shows, I think, just how important he thought what he was doing was. And I think, honestly, the fact that, just going back to the start of Turning Point USA, he started Turning Point, I believe, in 2012, the year that he graduated high school. Charlie and I are actually the same age. I went to college and remember hearing about this guy who was starting this political organization. And frankly, at the time, a lot of us thought he was crazy. We're like, no way this is going to succeed. The college Republicans have the monopoly on, campus conservatism. Who is this guy? Who does he think he is coming in trying to start this new group? And obviously he was immensely successful, not only on college campuses, but actually getting these student events up and running where he would have thousands of students coming to the Student Action Summit or the Young Women's Leadership Summit, and also creating Turning Point Action in 2019, which was the 501c4 that was doing grassroots campaign work for Donald Trump in the last election and really helping to turn the tide with young voters. I feel that he had been put on this earth for a reason, that God gave him a purpose, and he more than fulfilled that purpose. And I think a lot of people in the conservative movement feel this way, but that he is a martyr.
I want to be as sensitive as possible, both to his memory and to you. I mean, I would have disagreed with almost all of Charlie Kirk's views, as he would have disagreed with mine, and that's fine. It is fine for us to have vigorous disagreements in this country. I remember going through similar dynamics like this in Ireland, where people who I knew would have lost people to violence at the hands of groups whose political analysis I was somewhat sympathetic. It just gets very kind of complicated on a personal level. Is there anything, I know we only have a couple of minutes left in this segment. Is there anything else that you want to say or any other direction you want to go in this?
I hope that the suspect that they have is indeed the person. There was obviously two people that they had supposedly caught early on that it turned out were not the person. So I hope that they have actually found the killer, and I believe we're going to find out shortly, perhaps through a press conference, who that person is, confirming motivation, and I hope that person is held accountable. The Utah governor, in a speech earlier this week, reminded the nation that Utah still has the death penalty and that is a possibility for this. I also would like to echo a lot of the words of my fellow conservatives that retribution should come in the form of civic action and not violence. Charlie was very opposed, obviously, to political violence. He believed in talking out differences, having conversations. And I think the best way to honor his memory is by, yes, speaking forcefully, continuing to stand by our beliefs, and perhaps even if you haven't been speaking out before, doing that in his memory, but also not allowing this to turn into some type of civil war situation. I don't think that's what he would want. Sure.
I'm sure this is difficult for you, and I think that you've articulated, as I would expect, all those positions very well. So I'm not going to go any further than that.
Thank you. Appreciate that. All right. Up next, Senator Rand Paul is spilling secrets on the U.S. strike on a purported drug cartel boat off the coast of Venezuela. We have all the details next. Republican Kentucky Senator Rand Paul is revealing more details about the U.S. attack on a boat off the coast of Venezuela last week. He says the attack was actually a drone strike, a detail that the Pentagon and Secretary of War Pete Hegseth did not disclose. Paul told The Intercept the recent drone attack on a small speedboat over 2,000 miles from our shore without identification of the occupants or the contents of the boat is in no way part of a declared war and defies our long-standing Coast Guard rules of engagement. The senator went on to say that includes warnings to halt, non-lethal force to capture, and ultimately lethal force in self-defense or in cases of resistance.
Multiple people on board the ship were said to have survived the initial strike, according to exclusive reporting by The Intercept. Shortly after, they were apparently killed in a follow-up attack, American officials familiar with the matter told that outlet. As a reminder, 11 people were killed in the military strike on a so-called or alleged drug cartel boat. Venezuela maintains those killed were not gang members, with the country's interior minister and ruling party head calling the strike, quote, a murder, using, quote, lethal force. Now the strike is raising questions about President Trump's use of military power. Progressive Minnesota Representative Ilhan Omar announced yesterday she's introducing a war powers resolution in response to the strike. The Congresswoman writes on X, Trump launched a strike in the Caribbean with no legal authority, no congressional approval, and no answers about who was on the boat.
Vice President J.D. Vance has been a vocal supporter of the strike. Over the weekend, he got into a tiff with Senator Paul and commentator Brian Krasenstein over his posts about the matter. He writes on X, killing cartel members who poison our fellow citizens is the highest and best use of our military.
So, obviously I have quite a few problems with this in terms of what the US actually did. And in some ways, I think initially it was, if not exactly an underreported story, one where I'd fault myself for this. I don't think I maybe expressed enough outrage when I was discussing it with Robbie here as I perhaps should have. Because there is really no proof provided and no particular attempt so far to provide any proof. Simply this boat apparently being taken out, then the allegation that if they were drug traffickers, unproven, they are then narco-terrorists, which is also unproven, and that when Vance in particular was challenged on this, he made that remark that Senator Paul objected to about, I don't think we're allowed to use profanity, but not caring, shall we say, about whether it was part of international law or not. So, I have obviously very big problems with the United States or any other nation just randomly going around killing people in international territory.
I think a lot of this obviously rests on what intelligence they had in terms of figuring out who the people on the boat were and what the boat was carrying, which it's not unusual for the public not to be privy to that information. I think Senator Paul would be able to access it in a skiff and maybe he would change his mind. I'm not sure if he's done that yet or even asked to do that. I'm sure that would be helpful for clarifying what exactly happened here. But if it is true that the administration struck a cartel drug boat, then based on the fact that Trump has designated a lot of these cartels, including the one accused of being on the boat, as foreign terrorist organizations, then it is within his authority to strike them. And I think the argument for them being foreign terrorist organizations is that they don't just run drugs and kill people that they disagree with, but they actually do try to influence politics and intimidate political leaders in order to achieve their ends. Maduro is accused of accepting money from the cartels in exchange for allowing them to operate freely. And Tren de Aragua, which is the most prominent Venezuelan gang, recently in the United States was given permission from its leadership to attack U.S. police officers, including a very viral incident that happened in New York City where a group of Tren de Aragua members attacked police. Another one where a Tren de Aragua member was pulled over by a police officer and shot the police officer. So I think that's the argument for designated them foreign terrorist organizations, and if they are that, then the president does have the authority to do this strike.
So I think there are a lot of hypotheticals in that for a start. If they were Tren de Aragua, which we don't know, if they were members of a drug cartel, which we don't know, then you get into the more complicated issue of exactly how one defines Tren de Aragua. There was in fact an assessment done within the Trump administration that came out earlier this year that said that they did not find coordination between the government of Venezuela and Tren de Aragua to the extent that Trump and others have claimed. So I think there's this is why I think there are people like Rand Paul, who I rarely agree with, and me on essentially the same side of this question, because there is this massive vacuum or vacancy where there should be proof if the US government is going to run around doing this kind of thing. And not only, as I say, has that proof not been provided, the imperative to provide it doesn't appear to be being recognized at all. You have laid out there a plausible theory that the administration has not bothered supporting with any public facts as yet.
I suppose the issue, though, is, Niall, I think you would agree that if they are making this assessment based on confidential sources and methods, making those public could potentially burn people who are informants in the area. It could potentially reveal, sensitive methods of intel collection that we keep private for a reason. And so I'm not sure how realistic or fair it is to expect the administration to release that information.
Well, my rebuttal to that would be it is fair if the United States is going around killing people for them to provide proof as to why they're killing them. I mean, I think this goes to a perhaps philosophical difference that you and I have, where I think, broadly speaking, and I'll present this as fairly as I can, I think I tend to be more suspicious of law enforcement agencies generally, and you tend to, I think that they're mostly doing good work and that some things can't be told. Where I see the danger in your argument about, well, maybe if they made it public it would jeopardize sensitive sources and so forth, is that if one adopts that logic as a general principle, you just are handing over enormous power to the forces of the state to do as they wish, and then say, well, we can't actually provide you with the information because it'll jeopardize sources.
Yeah, and look, I think that's a very fair argument, and I'm understanding of it because there have been cases, of course, where the U.S. government or military or CIA have engaged in missions where they used classified intel that we found later on when it was declassified was either not as strong as we were led to believe or was used in the service of something that was actually against America's interest or against the interest of the individuals that it was being done to. So I am sensitive to that argument. And I think if they do have information that would not burn classified intel, then it would be helpful for them to share that so that we can see, okay, here are the names of the people who were on the boat, and here's their link to Tren de Aragua, if that's the case, or here's the evidence that they were carrying drugs. But it should be done in a way that makes sure that those sensitive methods are not revealed to the world.
Right, and to pick up on one of Rand Paul's points about the Coast Guard and the rules of engagement, I mean, apart from the general morality of those rules of engagement, they are designed to create a situation where people then face legal processes, and if the government has proof, it can provide that proof, and if they have exculpatory evidence, they can provide that exculpatory evidence. A bit too late for those 11 people on the boat, whatever they were doing and whoever they were now, because they're all dead.
That's where I think Rand Paul's argument actually falls apart, because he would basically be rejecting any form of war whatsoever. I mean, we would have to get Soleimani, for example, and put him in front of a U.S. court instead of doing a drone strike. I just don't think that's a feasible way of operating with foreign policy.
Maybe we'll get Rand Paul on to discuss his foreign policy
I would
principles
like that.
at some point.
I do like Rand Paul. I disagree with him on this one. Just weeks after a major merger, Paramount and new parent company Skydance reportedly have eyes set on one another. Don't go anywhere.
Just weeks after the Paramount Skydance merger was given the green light, the newly formed media giant reportedly has its eyes set on another studio, Warner Brothers.
The Wall Street Journal reports that Paramount Skydance is preparing a majority cash bid for Warner Brothers Discovery. The Journal reports the bid would be for the entire company, including its cable networks, the most prominent of which is CNN, and its movie studio. However, an official bid has not been submitted as of Friday morning. This all comes as Warner is preparing to split itself into two divisions early next year, one for cable TV and the other for streaming and studios.
But a potential merger between two of Hollywood's most storied studios could cause problems with antitrust regulators. Analysts say the potential offer is also likely to kickstart a bidding war for Warner Brothers, which could include potential bidders like Comcast, Amazon, and Netflix. Just to take that final point first, Amber, separate from all the politics, there is this element in all of this where Warner Brothers has obviously this enormous library of material, and whether it's Netflix or Amazon or Apple, a lot of people are interested in that, and so that's perceived to be one of the reasons that they're splitting this stuff off is because of the potential lucrativeness from it. I am obviously not very thrilled about the idea of Paramount Skydance taking over CNN, having already got its hooks into CBS into what I consider rather dubious circumstances, but I imagine you're much less concerned about the matter.
Well, I think you'll be surprised regarding the CBS rumblings about Barry Weiss taking over. Not a huge fan of the Free Press or Barry Weiss, actually.
Oh, well, there we have an unexpected sliver of common ground there.
I know. Well, they are very hyper-focused on defending Israel, which to me is... I mean, I'm an America First conservative, so it's like weird to me. I understand why Barry Weiss is that way. I mean, part of the reason why she left the New York Times was she felt that people were attacking her in anti-Semitic ways and sort of disliked her because of her Jewish heritage. But just reading the Free Press, there's this trend of the sort of disaffected liberals starting these independent media outlets, and they don't seem to be really any different from just your standard like corporate liberal media. And so when people are talking about how Barry Weiss is going to start this like radical transformation of CBS in their newsroom, I'm like, but how?
Well, you see, I agreed with like 90%, and then at the end I was like,
I know, I lost you.
I mean, look, I think that there's a kind of long tradition, not really dissimilar from the one you described, but of people who had been perceived as liberal kind of moving generally to the right. And then
I think that's the perception, but I'm not sure in practice that's actually what happens.
Well, I think that in her, I mean...
at least not in her case.
Yeah, I mean, in her case, it is complicated because it is so focused on Israel and got a lot of criticism, in my opinion, justly, for trying, I think, to minimize like horrific scenes of starvation and all of that very recently. So that is part of the equation here. I also was just looking at it last night, and it was... Neil Ferguson opining about something or other, and Ben Shapiro doing likewise. And I was like, to me, this is just like, it's kind of like the New York Post with bigger words to me. You know, it's sort of like very pro-Israel, somewhat conservative leaning, somewhat inflammatory, with a kind of veneer that we're independent-minded. I don't really see them that way at all.
Yeah, that's interesting how we have entirely different perceptions of what the Free
But we
Press
get kind of to somewhat to the same destination from very different routes.
Exactly. So I mean, the merger to me, I don't really care what happens to corporate media, to be honest with you. So for me, it's like, whatever.
Don't say that too loudly around here, Amber.
I know.
We'll go out of business.
I know, I'll get in trouble.
Yeah.
I mean,
you say what you want. I'm only kidding you. Yeah.
Anyway, let's talk about the streaming aspect of this.
Yes, okay.
The nice Warner Brothers thing that's going on.
Yes.
Yeah, I do think that that's obviously very lucrative. You know, one thing I've noticed with streaming over the years is it all started as this nice alternative to cable where you could have, you know, multiple different platforms of shows, and it would be cheaper and you wouldn't have commercials. Well, now they all have ads, and now we all have, 10 streaming services, and it costs more than cable at this point, and so the whole thing is just stupid.
Exactly. Now you have to bundle streaming services, which was
ridiculous.
The whole problem we were supposed to be getting away with. In any event, Benjamin Netanyahu is splitting with President Trump after this week's airstrike on Qatar. We'll talk about that next. Stick around. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu indicating that the strike earlier this week on Hamas targets in Qatar may not be a one-off.
That strike drew heavy criticism from leaders in the region as well as from President Trump, who posted on Truth Social following the attack, unilaterally bombing inside Qatar, a sovereign nation and close ally of the United States that is working very hard and bravely taking risks with us to broker peace, does not advance Israel or America's goals. The president continued, I believe this unfortunate incident could serve as an opportunity for peace. I also spoke to the Emir and Prime Minister of Qatar and thanked them for their support and friendship to our country. I assured them that such a thing will not happen again on their soil.
Trump reportedly took it a step further during a phone call with Netanyahu on Tuesday. According to Axios, Trump said the strike was, quote, unacceptable, and reportedly continued, I demand that you do not repeat it. But Netanyahu appears defiant, saying this in an address on Wednesday.
What did America do in the wake of September 11th? It promised to hunt down the terrorists who committed this heinous crime wherever they may be. Yesterday, we acted along those lines. We went after the terrorist masterminds who committed the October 7th massacre. And we did so in Qatar, which gives safe haven. I say to Qatar and all nations who harbor terrorists, you either expel them or you bring them to justice. Because if you don't, we will.
Qatar's prime minister said the strike had, quote, killed any hope of returning the remaining 48 Israeli hostages held by Hamas, 20 of whom are believed to be alive in Gaza.
First of all, to the Netanyahu point in those remarks, I mean, I just find him such a contemptible individual for a start. And I mean, he quite rightly, in my view, faces charges of war crimes. But to his specific point about Qatar, Qatar, with the cooperation of the United States and the sort of acquiescence of Israel, hosted people from Hamas because it was regarded as actually useful to have this kind of third territory where you could have talks, where you could find out what Hamas would or would not agree to. And this way precedes the terrible attacks of October 7th, for example. So, I mean, Netanyahu knows what the reality is here. And to my mind, he's just misrepresenting the reality in those remarks. And he is doing so in a way that has the effect of prolonging the conflict. And he, as we have spoken about before, has personal interests in prolonging the conflict, not least because he faces charges in Israel on corruption charges, that it's a very, very long running trial which he has tried to delay as much as possible. So I just have no time for that man.
I wonder if Trump's comments about the strike, calling it unacceptable, were sincere or damage control.
Right.
Because it seems pretty clear to me that the United States, to some effect, signed off on this or gave the green light or at least allowed it to happen. We know that Qatar, for example, did not deploy their air defense systems, and that Trump had apparently given them a heads up that this strike was coming, so he knew before the attack was launched. But now he does not want to have the perception that he was willing to give up this negotiating space and potentially destroy the possibility of returning the hostages. We've heard a lot that Trump is frustrated with Netanyahu, that he is sort of rethinking the U.S.'s relationship with Israel and what that should look like. But then when the Daily Caller interviewed him a few weeks ago and asked him about the changing feelings towards Israel, particularly among young people on the right, he sort of demurred and talked about the importance of them as an ally. So I'm just not convinced that, at least not publicly, that he's really tried to break from Netanyahu.
Yeah.
And at least not on policy matters and the way that the war is being carried out. So some of this reporting, I wonder if it's meant to, again, do some damage control.
Yeah, I think those are all fair points. And I think, just to stress a kind of bipartisan condemnation or criticism that I have, when President Biden was in office, we would hear repeatedly, oh, we're really very cross with Israel, and nothing would actually ever happen about it. Now, one thing I will say in Trump's defense is that at the very outset of his second term, he did in fact put pressure on for a ceasefire to be agreed and for the Israelis to sign up to that. They then subsequently broke that ceasefire with very little consequence. But I think you are right in pointing out there are these rhetorical moments when he appears to be upset with Netanyahu, and then the question is, does that lead to any concrete action? Because it's not just when Trump himself rows back on that. He has, for example, in Mike Huckabee, an ambassador to Israel who is extraordinarily pro-Israel and seems to see it very much in religious terms. Huckabee, of course, being a former Baptist preacher at one stage. So I think there's so many questions here, but one is, also that Qatar is in fact a US ally, the host to the biggest US military base in the region. And so to have this kind of attack take place, I agree with you, it seems inconceivable that the United States didn't know about it in advance. I know the Qataris have said they were only told about it by the US when it was already underway or something.
Allegedly.
Allegedly. I think that's a bit of face saving on their part. It's kind of very murky, but the point is, it seems to me that Netanyahu is once again both behaving in a selfish way while engaging in military action, a personally selfish way while engaging in military action, and doing things that are very unhelpful to the United States.
What do you make of Israel's argument that they are in a lose-lose situation because they've said, well, this is the precision strike that you've been asking us to do. There's no civilian casualties. We didn't, hit buildings in Gaza. So we do this, we get criticized. We go into Gaza, we get criticized. What are we supposed to do?
I mean, I just look. They have killed more than 60,000 people in Gaza. The idea that there will be a military victory won beyond the point that they're already at seems completely risible to me. I mean, they killed Yahya Sinwar, the main mastermind of the October 7th attacks. They have decimated the Hamas leadership while inflicting, in my view, completely unjustified suffering on a civilian population. So I just don't take it seriously, this idea of, well, this was a precision strike and, oh, we get damned if we do, damned if we don't. They're just going around. I mean, they have attacked Qatar, Syria, Lebanon, Iran. I think there's somewhere I'm actually forgetting in addition to their actions in Gaza. So I think there's a real question as to now whether the Israelis, are in fact a source of massive instability in the region itself.
All right, we're going to leave it there. A new release of Epstein documents leading to the termination of a UK diplomat, while also detailing relationships with a couple of high-profile people. We'll talk about it after the break.
In light of that, Mr. Speaker, and mindful, as we all are, of the victims of Epstein's appalling crimes, he has been withdrawn as ambassador with immediate effect.
The UK ambassador to the US sacked after new Epstein information comes to light. The US House Oversight Committee releasing more Epstein files showing UK ambassador Peter Mandelson writing a 10-page note to the convicted sex offender, calling Jeffrey Epstein his, quote, best pal. Britain's Parliament also found in that Mandelson believed Epstein's conviction was wrongful and should be challenged. That was his initial conviction some years ago.
Oh boy, now there's another set of new information that Bloomberg has obtained, including thousands of emails from Epstein's Yahoo account. Hundreds of those emails showing a much closer relationship between Epstein and confidant Ghislaine Maxwell than either previously publicly disclosed. The email trove also mentions President Trump in a few instances, mostly after Epstein was facing charges. One email showing Epstein telling Maxwell to remove Trump's name from a list of about 50 politicians. It's unknown what that list is in reference to.
So just to take the Peter Mandelson thing first, because it's quite rare that I get an opportunity to discuss...
Get on your soapbox.
Get on my soapbox about British politics. A brief history of contemporary British politics. The reason that this is, it's a massive story in Britain. And the reason for that is that Peter Mandelson is not some anonymous diplomat. He's been a very central figure in British politics for about 30 years. And one of the reasons this is a massive story over there is because he has critics on both sides. To make a long and rather convoluted story short, Peter Mandelson was very much associated with the process of bringing the British Labour Party from a harder left position into the centre. And he was very closely associated with Tony Blair, the former Prime Minister, in that project. As Mandelson was fighting those sort of internecine battles, he offended a lot of people on the left of the British Labour Party. He got this nickname, the Prince of Darkness, because he would be sort of Machiavellian.
That's Ozzy Osbourne's nickname.
Exactly. So there we go. Perhaps the sole point of parallel between them. So on the one hand, the left of the British Labour movement dislikes him, and on the other hand, the British Conservatives dislike him because he's Labour and because he was very effective. Separate from that, and this goes, I think, to the Epstein matter and to some of Jeffrey Epstein's other friends and associates, Mandelson for a long time appears to have had this sort of basically weakness for rich people. He has got in trouble at least a couple of times before when the Labour Party under Blair was in government. Mandelson had to resign not once but twice. Once because he had obtained a home loan secretly from a wealthy guy who was also serving, Postmaster General is the post in the government, a guy called Jeffrey Robinson. And the second resignation because Mandelson had intervened to a disputed extent to get a British passport for a very rich Indian businessman. So you put that on top of the stuff with Epstein, and it's a very unflattering picture. I don't know how much attention you paid to some of the documents that came out with Mandelson, but it was pretty grim stuff in the birthday book, you know. There were references to interesting guests, and it's this photo of a very young woman, at least her face is obscured, but in sort of skimpy clothing. Mandelson talks about how great Epstein's private properties were, and then adds yum yum, which kind of is like, oh. So it was all pretty bad. And then these other emails that we mentioned from Bloomberg come out, and that was the end for Mr. Mandelson.
Yeah, well, I have to say, I think the American media, no surprise, did not do a great job of providing the proper context, and also not making clear that apparently the communications continued through the allegations and the first set of charges against Epstein, because most of them led with, he was fired because his name was in the birthday book.
Right.
He wrote a letter in the birthday book, which was before he was ever convicted on sexual misconduct and the sex trafficking. So I think it would have been smarter for the American media to lead with the fact that he was continuing communications and a friendship with him after those details were known to the public.
Exactly. And in fact, in these emails, one of the emails from Mandelson to Epstein is right before Epstein's about to go to jail for that earlier, albeit rather lenient sentence. And Mandelson is encouraging him to be resilient and telling him that his friends will stand by him and stuff. That's terrible political judgment. I have met Peter Mandelson a couple of times over the years in person. He can be quite charming and everything. I mean, he, contrary to the Prince of Darkness reputation, he is actually very affable in person, but there are massive questions about his political and personal judgment because of these kinds of issues. As I say, having already been fired from actual political positions in government and now removed as ambassador, it's really impossible to imagine him having any sort of political career beyond this. I think that's the end of that road.
It certainly seems that way. 2 resignations and then a firing for being friends with a convicted pedophile.
Not great. Not a great record.
Yeah, we're not a super great record.
No.
I am glad to see that we're getting more of the Epstein information out. There's been obviously a lot of pressure from the Republican base and now the Democrats to get the Epstein files out in the open. And I think the Oversight Committee actually has been doing a good job of getting things like bank records, the birthday book, and releasing all of that information to the public. It's been actually kind of heartening after the initial major bungling of this by the Trump administration.
No, there was a lot of bungling. I also saw just yesterday, I think, Thomas Massey was claiming to be within 1 signature required for that discharge petition. Now, I don't know. I'm not clear. Are the names public, or could he just be claiming that? I'm not 100% sure.
I didn't see a list of names. I think people are kind of frustrated with him right now because there was this hyper focus on that yesterday and what was really a day of mourning for a lot of people.
Sure.
And he was basically saying that Trump calling his discharge position a hostile act was the same as leftists calling people Nazis, and it's the type of rhetoric that leads to shootings like the one that occurred on Wednesday.
Oh, I didn't actually see that.
Yeah, I thought it was in very poor taste.
Yeah, I wasn't aware of those remarks, and those seem very ill-judged in those kinds of circumstance. And we mentioned the Ghislaine Maxwell point. I mean, I think Ghislaine Maxwell is rightly in prison for what she did, and I wasn't a fan of the somewhat suspicious moving of her to a more lenient or softer detention facility. In relation to, this suggestion that, we now know she was closer to Epstein, like I mean, we knew they were extremely close.
Yeah, I'm
like
a little
she's in
confused by
prison.
that too.
She's in prison because she's a co-conspirator of his. So I'm not sure how much.
How could you be closer?
Yeah, how could you be closer than be like literally involved in the same criminal enterprise? So I think that we do have to sort of winnow out or be discerning as to sort of what matters and what doesn't here. As I say, that's no defence at all of Ghislaine Maxwell, who I think was rightly found guilty.
Yeah, that prison you mentioned, Elizabeth Holmes, the sort of infamous healthcare fraudster, was there as well. And I believe it was maybe the New York Post that did a profile of sort of what the prison is like. And there's a lot of exercise time, and it's very low security, and it's almost like a little ranch. And
It's crazy.
I know, it is crazy.
It's just very, very dubious that people like that. I mean, I think I'm not. White collar crime is still crime, and obviously people should still be treated punitively for it. But like what Ghislaine Maxwell did is a whole different level to me, and so I think the leniency in her case is even more dubious. Just as we kind of close the circle on this, Amber, do you think there is still, I mean, you mentioned that people are glad about the Oversight Committee and all that. Do you think there's still discontent in populist or MAGA circles about the Epstein matter, or do you think that's beginning to fade?
I think it's fading. It hasn't really been top of mind from what I can tell outside of Thomas Massey and perhaps Marjorie Taylor Greene. But amongst the base, I haven't seen it on social media as aggressively. I mean, occasionally there will be comments that I see in response to news stories of people saying, but what about the Epstein files? But I can't imagine that this is going to be some like major party splitting issue by the time we get to the midterms. And I don't even think it's at that point now, which is a long way from where we were, just a couple of months ago when there was the announcement that there was no client list.
Soon after, Pam Bondi had said there definitely was.
It was on her desk.
It was on her desk. Not a good moment. The FIFA World Cup is coming to the United States next summer, and fans are already looking to get tickets. Coming up, why Zoran Mamdani is bashing FIFA's ticket-selling plans for the big event. Stay with us. The 2026 FIFA World Cup is set to kick off here in North America next June. Most of the matches will be played in the United States, although a few are also taking place in Canada and Mexico.
But New York City mayoral candidate Zoran Mamdani is concerned that average fans will miss out on their chance to attend. Take a look at this video he posted.
For the first time, FIFA is using dynamic pricing, where they're going to figure out in real time how much they can get away with for charging a ticket. The tickets can be resold on an official FIFA platform with no price cap. That means you could buy a ticket for $60 and sell it for $6,000. And unlike the last 3 World Cups, there's nothing set aside for residents. What this all means is the biggest sporting event in the world is happening in your backyard, and you'll be priced out of it.
He looks like he can actually play a bit. MetLife Stadium, located just outside New York City, will be hosting 8 World Cup matches, including the final. Mamdani's Game Over Greed campaign is calling for FIFA to end dynamic pricing, place a cap on resale prices, and put aside 15% of tickets for local residents at a discount.
FIFA has responded to Mamdani's campaign. In a statement to the Washington Post, FIFA says, quote, "The pricing model adopted generally reflects the existing and developing market practice in our co-host for major entertainment and sporting events on a daily basis, soccer included. We are focused on ensuring fair access to our game for existing but also prospective fans and are offering group stage tickets starting at $60.
FIFA expects more than 6 million fans to attend next year's World Cup, bringing in billions of dollars to the economy. So, first of all, are you a soccer fan, I should say?
No, I am not.
You're quite a sporting fan. Generally, you like tennis and golf.
Tennis, golf, baseball, football, college basketball. Never got into soccer. I do watch the Women's World Cup because the U.S. team is quite good.
It's much better in the women's game than it is in the men's. So, look, I mean, I'm not a massive soccer fan. I played it like most people of my age did when I was a kid. I played goalkeeper in soccer. But the point is, here, I think the issue is broader than the World Cup. It goes into the issue of dynamic pricing, which I have been afflicted by when I've been looking for concert tickets for various big name acts. I don't like dynamic pricing. I think it's a sort of scam, essentially, to up the prices and to enable either the organisation that's selling it or the organisation that routes those sales, hello Ticketmaster, for all of that sort of stuff. Quite aside from my general sympathy for Mr. Mamdani's politics, I think if he's going to run a campaign against dynamic pricing, I'd be all in favour.
You're going to be shocked, but I actually agree with you.
Oh, wow.
Yeah,
amazing. Getting on the Mamdani bandwagon here.
Not quite that far, but look, I am an avid concert goer. I go to a lot of sporting events, and inevitably what happens is that you get a bunch of scalpers who buy up the tickets first moment they go on sale, and then they resell them for exorbitant prices that are way above the actual market price, and people have no choice basically but to pay those massive prices, plus the insane fees that Ticketmaster puts on pretty much every sale. Yeah. So there's actually a fun crossover here because Zohran Mamdani is talking about this, but a few years ago, a very popular country artist you may have heard of by the name of Zach Bryan was talking about All My Homies Hate Ticketmaster. It's actually a live album that he put out because of the fact that a lot of his fans were being priced out of his shows and were being taken advantage of by scalpers. And so they had worked out some kind of system where you had to sign up for a pre-sale through his website and with a valid email address, and then there was actually a lottery system to determine whether you were allowed to actually go in and buy tickets. And then I think Morgan Wallen did something similar with his previous tour that took place, I think, about a year ago. I went to the one at FedEx Field. Sure. But yeah, it's insane. Yeah. And to see the prices that some of these tickets go for is just completely outrageous. And I think in an event like the World Cup, the host city is really doing a favor. I mean, yes, they are getting the economic benefit of the sport coming in, but they are also opening up, their public transit, the stadium for these games to take place. And it is only fair, I think, for the residents to get some kind of fair shot at making sure that they can attend.
Yeah, I agree. And that has been the case in previous World Cups, apparently. So this is really a break with the tradition to have it not so far be the case that New York City residents get that discount. Just to round off on another point of very amiable crossover, I'm also a Zach Bryan fan. I think he's a very good songwriter. So, and good for him to take his stand against Ticketmaster.
Yes, very important. And I will also note that PGA events, it's flat pricing until, there's resales that are allowed. Sure. But I just have noticed with things like the Ryder Cup and the BMW Championship that all the tickets for the various tiers are one price, and then people can resell later, but it rarely goes above what you paid for the ticket.
As it should be.
Exactly. All right. That does it for us on Rising Live. Look out for more exclusive YouTube content coming your way today. Be sure to like, share, and subscribe to The Hill's YouTube channel so you never miss any content. And for those of you who like to listen while on the go, we are now available anywhere you listen to podcasts.